it still
It
says
says
offline.
streaming. What about now?
You're still offline.
Maybe you have to refresh.
Yeah, I'm refreshing
I-
it.
Refreshing.
And nope.
Nothing.
This is absurd. I'm so angry right now.
All of this
PB
planning.
and J says quit life. Are we live?
Okay, I think we're live now. We're live.
Yeah, it says live.
Well, we have an ad, so give us like 30 seconds for the ad.
We have an ad.
Yeah.
Put
I don't
that
have an
there.
ad. Oh, Sophie sees us. Okay, so we are live. Anyway, welcome to the show. I have to play this video and it wasn't working for me anyway. Like nothing went right there. Hear the sound? Ugh. Alright. How did I do it last time?
I don't know.
Maybe I should have tested this.
That would have been good,
Next time.
bro.
Like that? Yeah, that worked. But it has the... I hate everything. It worked last time. Hey guys, we're
I
gonna play the
believe you.
intro video, and you're gonna like it. Alright.
Oh, I heard it. Here we go.
1, 2. No! And that's our video. What's up, everyone? Welcome. What do we call the show?
Pain in the neck.
Pain in the neck. Thank you, Prog, again, for your genius.
Absolute
Welcome.
genius.
Yeah. Welcome to Melee It On Me. This is episode 2. Here we are, trying out a new format. We're really excited about the show tonight. And I'm going to do the thing that other people do, where I ask everybody how they're doing, even though we did a pre-show. Prog, how are you doing today?
I'm quite fabulous today.
Fabulous. Cactuar, how are you feeling, my friend?
Same old, you know.
Sheridan, what's up, my man?
I am doing well. I'm a very busy person, but taking care of business, and now we're doing this show, and I feel good about it.
Everybody, give Sheridan a hand. Dr. Z. He is
Not yet. We're getting there.
No, I'm gonna call you. Okay, maybe I shouldn't call you Dr. Z, but I remember recently Cactus said that your time is more valuable than all of ours combined. And so, yeah, good stuff. So I talked about it on the pre-show, but we're gonna change the format a little bit this episode. We're gonna have a powwow between the four of us, where we talk about various topics. We're gonna start with NEC. It was a tournament in Prog. Help me. Where was it? New Jersey.
Philadelphia. 215.
It was in the 215.
Yes, sir.
So, Cactus, why don't you? Cactus is the only one of the four of us who was there, and so let's start with what happened, and go on from there.
Alright, well, the actual incident that happened, I was just kind of walking by when it happened and found myself lodged between Unknown from Canada and Inui from Jersey. And Inui was mostly a brawl player, so what he was doing over on that side of the room, I don't know. But all I heard from it when I walked over was Alex Strife was addressing Inui, trying to get him to move back from the tournament setup. And Inui had moved back maybe like 3 or 4 feet, but he was actively arguing with Alex Strife, trying to defend his right to heckle Unknown, I guess. And while that was happening, Unknown was obviously in the middle of his set. Given that he had already told Inui to move back and was probably annoyed with him, he's going to be focusing on Inui's voice more, but not so much what he's saying, just the fact that it's present and right behind him. So I think Inui arguing with Alex Strife kind of got on his nerves, and he kind of snapped. And I think he paused the match. Did he take the time to pause the match?
He did.
He took the time to pause the match, put his controller down, and then jumped at Inui, and I guess was in the process of trying to choke him, was yelling at him, asking him if he wanted to die or something like that, and it gets broken up. Inui gets taken out of the room by Alex Strife. Unknown goes back to playing the set and loses. From there, that's all I know of that incident. After Unknown had played Hacks, there was a second incident where he got up from the set, talked to me briefly, and then I wasn't paying attention. He walked over the door and I heard commotion, and apparently Unknown was like choking out Inui by the door. Anything that I say about that would just be what I heard, so I'll let you guys kind of read up on it. But from what I do hear, as Unknown was passing by, Inui said something snarky to him like, you deserve to lose to Hacks or something like that along those lines, and Unknown flipped, and anyway, kept talking, and then, yeah, things went down. It gets broken up again. Big E, the host of NEC, the whole thing, had to come over and kind of address both of those players, I believe. Alex Strife goes through kind of hell dealing with this, and now has to make a decision on what to do with those players for Apex and for forthcoming months of his own local tournaments. That's kind of where we're at. So, any questions?
Not from me. Anybody else? I think that was a great summary.
I mean, I'm just like everyone else. I just had hearsay, and there was a lot of it. So,
I've been trying to keep up with the various accounts given of this. I looked over what Inui said, what Unknown said, and what Alex said, and tried to put together in my head like what's actually happened. So, excuse me. Yeah, and that all seems to pretty much sum it up. But I mean, there's obviously, different. There's differing details in each person's account. So I don't know how much we want to, go into. He said. I guess with that.
Yeah. So I think that the most interesting part is, I guess, how it started, right? So I think that the second incident is one of those things where it seems like it was already bad at that point. So maybe we should work up to that. Right.
Yeah.
So Sheridan mentioned earlier, sort of like, it's not really the question of who is responsible, but like, what were the different steps that got us to there?
Yeah. And I mean, I think, really Unknown should have been kicked out the first time. That would have prevented all of this. I don't know what he should have done with Inui at that point. But, from Big E's account and a couple of posts that I saw Inui make, it seemed as if, he was just kind of looking for trouble at that point and, try to give some plausible deniability about it. But obviously I wasn't there, and this is just, what I've seen people saying, so I can't take it as complete fact.
Yeah, so let's actually clarify that now. So the three of us, Prog, Sheridan, and I, are sort of just talking about what we've heard and sort of responding to that. Cactuar has a first-hand account, but the three of us don't really.
Yeah.
So when you say he should have been thrown out, what is the point at which he crossed the line and should have been thrown out?
I mean, as soon as you put your hands on somebody, then with an intent to hurt them, or even looking like you have intent to hurt them, I think that's when you have to go. Unless like the two people can reconcile it, kind of right there and then, or like within a few minutes. Otherwise, I think Unknown should have been gone.
So, do we have an official rule about that? Do we have any rule about?
No,
TO
it's just one of those things where it's one of those things where it's left up to the TO's discretion about that. But I think usually people have an understanding that you're just not supposed to do that, and the TO usually was going to mete out some kind of punishment for doing that.
I mean, it goes without saying that violence is always going to be an action that is irreprehensible. It shouldn't happen. So
Yeah.
I don't think there is I don't think a rule is necessary for it. It's just it shouldn't be in our scene at all. But
That's actually an interesting question. Should there be a rule written down? I mean, I wonder, like, was it a preventer for what Sheridan you think is the right action, which is throwing him out, that we don't have any sort of official rule for it?
No, I think you need to have it, if not like a very specific rule, but at least something saying, any kind of violence is not acceptable at our tournaments, and if you're caught doing this, the TO is going to kick you out, barring exceptional circumstances. Up to him.
What do you think about that, Prog?
I concur.
Sheridan, when you say any kind of violence, what is that? Is that any physical contact that's unwelcome?
Yeah. I mean, if you're trying to put your hands on somebody and physically, mess with them, then yeah.
So what about, like, does that extend to the threat of violence, like a perceived realistic threat?
Yeah, I would say so. But I mean, it's that the hard part about that is gauging what's realistic and whether they mean it or not. But I think usually you should err on the side of caution for things like that.
Yeah. So I feel that having a rule for it does enable the TO to, like, act on it. They already know, like, it's in the playbook what I should do. So.
Well, it's less for the TO and more for the players, I think, understanding that, this is what's going to happen if you do this. I think TOs generally understand, that they can't have this at the tournaments.
And so, do we all agree about that? I think that's about it for getting physical. And then the second act would have been prevented, right? Because he's already out of the venue. Or they had reconciled it, right? And then we would expect that it, like, sort of diffuses the situation. But as it stands, it was still, like, a high level of tension, and then something else happened, which. Okay.
Right.
So then that's that. So then how about sort of a step back? It seems like from at least Unknown's account and several other accounts that he was sort of provoked. How does trash talk and fan interaction with players play into this? Anybody want to take it?
Well, I think in terms of trash talking and whatnot, there are certain boundaries. There are certain things that you can and can't talk about. I'm not sure what was said. I wasn't there. My one account that I do know of is proximity. Generally, if you're cheering for someone, you sit next to that person and you're talking to them. You're not talking across their opponent. I, for one, think that's rude to begin with. And that's mostly it. From what I hear, it was Unknown in the middle, Mewtwo King on the right, and you in the left. And anyway, was speaking across Unknown during his match, which is, it's not a bright thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's personal space issues. You have to give somebody their space. They can't feel like they've got people crowding around them on either side doing whatever. But as far as the actual content of the trash talk, like, from both of their accounts, I don't think, like, what Inui actually said was the issue. As far as I know, he just said, like, nice Gimp or good shit Mewtwo King or something like that. And what Unknown told me was that it wasn't what he said, it was just that he was so close and so loud to him that he just couldn't deal with how obnoxious it was. But as far as what you should be allowed to say, I think, as long as you're not, like, too close to the guy that's, actively distracting him or interfering with him, you should be able to say mostly anything you want. I would draw a line at something like, I I remember there was a tournament a while back where Everlasting Yeyes was calling Doe a faggot over and over, and that's like not something that you can have at a tournament. So like that's something I would call like personal harassment.
How about
If you're-
hate speech? I think that's
I think personal if you get into somebody's personal business, then I think that like kind of encompasses that as well. Because I think you should be able to say whatever you want about like how they're playing the game. Like, oh, this motherfucker can't even L cancel or whatever, some bullshit like that. I feel like that's perfectly acceptable as long as it's not, too loud and too distracting.
Anybody else? Does anybody else think that this motherfucker cannot L cancel is
It's
bad? Can we
I'd
draw
like
the
to
line
see-
there, or is
I'd
that
like to see
is
that
that
set
fair play? Cactuar, what do you think?
I mean, to avoid the question, going back to Inui, I mean, from what I've heard, there was a long-standing issue between Inui and Unknown. And given that Inui has been addressed by Unknown on several different occasions, like, in my head, I can't justify him thinking that it would be okay to be standing behind Unknown, and that his
Right.
intention was anything other than to try and disrupt play, as opposed to try and cheer for Jathan.
Okay, so,
So-
let me push you on that a little bit. So, there's the issue of how close he was and how disruptive he was to Unknown. Okay, that's on one side, but on the other side is the sort of like Unknown said. I don't know if you could clarify. In the past, did he say, "Can you not stand so close," or "Can you not say anything"? Do you know what I mean?
Well, actually, I think in Unknown's ROM 5 shoutouts, he did mention, Inui, we've had issues in the past. I don't know why you have to pretty much be on my bad side. So something to those lines, that effect.
Right, and so even if I have, I want to know if anybody is okay with that being like acceptable. Like, for example, if I was bothered by Sheridan, every time he talks, I get super mad, and I just can't deal with it. Can I tell Sheridan, hey, don't cheer at my matches, or else I'm gonna get up and yell at you. I'm gonna pause the game and yell at you. Do you know what I mean? I know that I'm setting this up in such a way that the answer's somewhat obvious to me, but I don't see how it could be different than that.
Well, I think what matters is like how distracting it is. If you're like one voice in a crowd, then I don't think you have really a case against that. If it's like if it's like a pools match, and I'm like the only person there, and I'm saying shit, then I think that's a different situation, right?
How so?
Well, because the level of distraction that I'm putting on you, I think is different in those situations. I think it's hard to single out one person in the crowd, as long as I'm not like invading your personal space or being too loud, like compared to anybody else. I wouldn't say you have the right to remove somebody from the crowd just because you don't like what they're saying, like in the context of what we agreed that's okay to say generally.
Okay. So, but I think maybe I missed the answer. So if you're saying something that's within what we said is okay, if you're saying Scar can't L cancel, and you're following me around, even in my pools matches, saying, oh man, Scar can't L cancel, that's
not okay.
I mean, I think the player has to have a certain amount of like rights, though, in that situation, where we should be able to go to a TO and say, if something isn't done about this person doing this, then I can't guarantee what's going to happen, but I'm taking preventative measures to try and stop that kind of like snap from happening. Where Unknown did go to Alex Strife, and he did ask him to help after having addressed Inui, because Alex Strife was sitting right next to the setup as well.
Yeah.
And for Inui to just kind of sit there and argue with the TO rather than just kind of listening to him, it's just irresponsible player behavior.
Yeah, I agree with that. From what Alex Strife and Christmas said, they both thought it was loud and annoying from where they were sitting. So, but I don't know how close they were versus how close Unknown was to Inui, so who can say whether what the relative loudness of that is. But yeah, going back to what you said, I definitely think the player always has the right to ask the TO to do something about it. And the TO has to kind of take it on a case-by-case basis, whether he thinks, the person in the crowd needs to shut up or whether the player needs to deal with it. And I would always say that the TO should err on the side of giving the player in the match the benefit of the doubt.
I agree with that.
Yeah, it is a case-by-case basis. So, I mean, there are a lot of different factors in terms of proximity, what's being yelled. But, you have to have respect for everyone that's involved. You have to have respect for the players that are playing a match, especially if you're. I mean, I'm all for having trash talk and for talking to try and help your friends out. But there are limits that just have to be followed and respected to these people as human beings, let alone as your fellow smashers. So. Word.
Yeah, word. I agree with that for sure. Okay, so I wanted to draw another quick distinction about trash talk in general. So there's a difference between some kind of physical interaction and like psychological. So basically, we talked about if somebody's yelling so loud that it actually like hurts your ears. If they're within a certain number of feet to the player, if they're like breathing down somebody's neck literally, I feel like we are all in agreement that that's not okay.
Yeah, I don't even think it has to hurt their ears. It just has to be like, if it's the loudest thing that they can hear in the room.
What's that?
Then that's definitely.
Sorry to cut you off. What's that legal word that people use? Reasonable? If it's unreasonably.
Yeah, but I mean,
not down
that's
with it.
Such a subjective term. So
purposefully though.
Yeah, I mean, when it's obvious somebody's intent is to disrupt one player and get them to play worse.
I actually like that as a general rule.
This is where the argument of cheering versus heckling versus like disruptive speech comes into play. And cheering, the intent of cheering is to bolster one individual and try and help them play better, to give them confidence, to let them know that this crowd of people is there to support them. Heckling, well, we'll call it trash talking. Trash talking is just kind of like screaming nonsense in the air and trying to like provide hype. It gives like excitement, like a buzz to the crowd.
Yeah.
Disruptive like comments and just trying to like, if you're just yelling out one player's name to intentionally try and distract them, to get them to draw their attention away from the match, if you're somebody who has a history with them and bothers them and standing right next to them, and obviously that person's going to notice you because bad blood or whatever, that's intentionally trying to disrupt the match. Like, it's not acceptable for you to reduce the quality of play as opposed to better it.
Right, and especially when, I mean, I think what's reasonable or obvious or in the best interest of the match is basically up to the TO to decide. And, given that the TO did ask Inui to move, and, he did move back, but I don't know if the actual volume or content or, loudness from unknown standpoint actually decreased. And apparently he was arguing with Alex Stripe the whole time, so it's I don't know why he had such an interest in being right.
Well,
next
that's
to
the problem. This is where the player, like specifically in this case Inui, he has kind of a history of wanting to set people off, but I don't know that this is like appropriate conversation for the podcast as opposed to just treating him as if it was any player.
Yeah.
So.
Well, there are a lot of people who have like trollish backgrounds. I mean, we could talk about, something that pops into my mind was ROM 4. Daryl was really giving Chillin a hard time. Oh my god, man! And there was some like really raised voices between the two of them. But it definitely not. It wasn't as tense as this at all. But I mean, he was going at him, and I think that for Daryl, for one reason or another, I've never heard anybody actually complain about the way that he disrupts or tries to essentially knock somebody down. Is there a tangible difference between that and what we're talking about here?
Well, actually, I want to interject with a different point. A lot of people have been saying, have headphones and things of that nature to try and stop this from happening. However, and they always point to fighting game players as having headphones. The difference is when you're plugged in to your headphones at a fighting game tournament, you're actually hearing the game audio, which is being used for all of your cues. If you plug in your headphones at a Melee tournament, you're probably listening to your favorite song or something like that.
Right, and some people we shouldn't like make having headphones be a requirement to
Right.
be a good player to avoid distraction. Like if that's what we're gonna suggest as a solution to the problem.
So, Cactuar actually brought up something interesting when we talked earlier. It's not on the podcast. So you probably remember you brought up the idea of like playground rules. You know, we've all been on the playground and we know what is acceptable to say and what's not. You know, what's messed up and what's generally accepted. And I think that idea serves as a good sort of baseline for the contents of what you should say. Cactuar, do you want to talk any more about it, or does that sum it up?
That pretty much sums it up. I mean, again, as Scar said, we've all been on the playground. We've kind of like developed an awareness of how our behavior will interact with another person. And as a kid, I mean, you can kind of get away with this trollish behavior where you're trying to provoke kids. Because I guess it's funny when you're 12, when you're 10, maybe younger. But as adults, I mean, we have to treat each other with respect. And actively going out and trying to provoke somebody into having a physical reaction because you say you have less to lose than this other person. If they get physical, then they get kicked out. Like, you're using your, like, kind of pathetic nothingness as a weapon against another person, and that's just not acceptable.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, again, I kind of want to give Inui a little bit of benefit of the doubt here, but what he posted on Facebook, he basically said that in those terms was, you know, I'm tempted to provoke him more just so he can get kicked out because it's not like I can be disqualified. So, I mean, I don't know if that was just like some bullshit he was spouting because he was mad at the time or whether he really believed that or what. But either way, that's like, you know, as far as I'm concerned, that's nearly as bad in terms of, you know, respecting the, you know, integrity of the tournament and everybody who puts it on and all the players. And somebody who came to a tournament that, you know, explicitly had that goal in mind, you know, they should definitely be out.
Yeah, so just to build on that, you know, my idea about that is that there are certain things that we regulate, that TOs have rules for. You know, okay, we're going to throw you out if you get physical, but sort of the playground idea where it's like if you say something that's okay, nobody has a problem with you, but if you cross that line, we might not have anything in the rule book about it, but there are definitely social penalties for being out of line. And, you know, I feel like I also want to give Inui the benefit of the doubt about what happened there specifically. You know, it seems like he didn't ask for what happened at all. But yeah, to come back and sort of say, like, you know, I want to do it again, that's where you cross that line. And, you know, not to put Inui on blast or anything, but if you ever feel, I'm kind of talking at you, if you ever feel like people are hating on you, that's like a social kind of penalty for saying something that's pretty messed up. So anyway, if there's no last words on that, I wanted to bring up one last point that I think that we touched on but didn't cover, which is the skill of dealing with the crowd. Like, I really respect people like Dr. Peepee, people like Mango, who can sit down, have 1 million people cheering against them, and play their best. What are our thoughts on that, and like how valuable is that? How does that play in with Sheridan's example of following somebody around in pools and heckling them? Anybody have an opinion?
I mean, it's part of the game. You look at someone in the playoffs going to an away stadium, about 40,000 people chanting against them. We could bring up. I actually posted about this in the Google Doc. Let me use my notes. There are. Let's see. So first off, we can talk about soccer. Premier League, where you have huge stadiums and racial epithets being chanted. There's always going to be consequences for a person who's involved. We look at what happens when a player feels that their boundaries have been stepped over with the Pacers versus Pistons a few years ago, and that whole brawl that broke out. But I forgot where I was going with this. What was the topic again?
So you brought up a good
skill of
point.
dealing with the crowd.
Yeah, you brought up
right.
a good point.
Yeah,
like if the player feels that their boundaries have been stepped over, but if you have a person whose boundaries are really small, they want you to shut up, they don't want anybody to watch, I mean, I think it's obvious that we can't have that. So where is that line?
Oh.
Well, I mean, that's
Jeez.
it's really just whatever
Good
the
question.
community decides is the line. I mean.